Coming up today on Locked On Texas Tech, a mid-season assessment from the head coach and who from the injury list has returned to practice or is trending in a positive direction. We're into it next on Locked On Texas Tech.
You are Locked On Texas Tech, your daily podcast on the Texas Tech Red Raiders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Great to be with you again on Locked On Texas Tech on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, always free and available on YouTube or anywhere you get podcasts. Thanks as always for making us your first listen. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. So visit FanDuel.com to get started. With the only Chris Level, I'm Casey Cowan. Chris, great to be back with you as we continue to make our way through the most electric open week in the nation. Red Raiders preparing for a homecoming matchup with Baylor a week from Saturday, and we got to hear from Red Raider head coach Joey McGuire on a couple of different fronts I want to get into with you here today. We'll get to what I thought was a really interesting list of names that he was running down that not only included some guys who have been on injury lists and whether or not they're practicing or to what extent this week, but also some of those young names that you mentioned to us on an episode earlier in the week that I'm really interested to find out if maybe they're going to have a chance to make an impact in some games coming up very, very soon. But first, let's just take a listen to Coach McGuire talking about, in general, an assessment of where his program is at midway through the season.
I'm really proud of the way these guys, the resiliency, how hard they're playing, finding ways to win. I think we are doing some good things as far as I think we're taking care of the football. Really proud of Barron. That was a huge emphasis through spring and out of spring of taking care of the football. I think we're really balanced. Whenever you have a guy like Taj Brooks, you have to play us like you can't say, okay, we're going to take away the run, and then we have the skill around it, to throw the football. So I'm happy in that direction. I thought this was our worst game in the offensive line that we played all year, and I thought Arizona had a good plan. I thought they did some good things. We've got to be a lot better. It was really a lot of our left side. Sterling, which that was his second game. I think we'll continue to grow there. And Dalton. That's going to be a big emphasis this week because we're playing really, really good edge rushers. When we play Baylor, Garmin Randolph and Steve Linton are two of the best, I think, in the Big 12, very physical guys. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's funny. Simplicity allows people to play faster. And so we didn't have some of the guys that we normally have. And so our game plan, even though there was enough and a good number of defensive calls on Saturday, I thought it was the fastest we played all year long on the defensive side of the ball. And one reason was we didn't have a Chapman Lewis, and we didn't have Isaac Smith, and we didn't have Amir. So you had guys playing that didn't have as many reps. Well, I'm of that belief that that's what you want. You want it to look complex but be simple and let your guys play fast. I think we can trend in that direction. I do think whenever you look at our numbers on both sides of the ball, especially on the defense, we're trending in a better direction. Like we're still, if you look at nationally, our numbers are not very good. But if you look at which you go on Big 12 and they have the conference stats only, we're going this way. Like if you do our overall stats in the Big 12, we're down here. But then when you go conference only, we move up. In the red zone, we move up and, things like that. We're doing a good job of stopping the run. I think we're giving up in conference only 114 yards a game. And so doing a good job there. Really proud of those special teams, man. Our kickers are making kicks. We haven't missed a field goal yet, and that's huge. I think our punter is getting better. We've got to get more out of our punt return game, and then it's hard right now to get anything out of kickoff return because nobody wants to kick it to Dre McCray, and then we play the kicker that he kicks everything out of the end zone.
Some interesting things to consider there, Chris, talking about some positive defensive trends. Also talking about, as he views it, the worst week yet for the offensive line. I was maybe a little surprised to hear that, but what'd you make of what he had to say after 6 games?
I mean, Joey has never been one to hold anything back. I mean, I was trying to think of a way to phrase that, but yeah, it's just it's pretty blunt there. And I know it's interesting. I had said a thing or two a few weeks ago about, because Taj continues to have a few of these days where and you're playing decent on offense, but then you kind of feel like, man, maybe our offensive line is kind of coming together. But I'd said something a few weeks ago, kind of just being like, man, it's just kind of be a bit of a struggle. But, there's not, just this all world upside with this group. I mean, it kind of is what it is, and you're scheming, you're using tight ends, you're doing all kinds of things to try to mask some of your deficiencies, whether it's guys out of position or having to play something different than what you thought or inexperience, whatever. And there were some people that were, I don't know, trying to take up for him. And that's great. But I think that you kind of see where we're at here. It is, I do think they have found something that works, although I think that this is like the bye week. I bet Ty Buchanan's knocking on the door a little bit going, hey, man, if one of these guys falters or can't do it, then I can fill in at tackle or maybe guard. And I think your left side of your line was a bit of a struggle versus Arizona with Merriman and Porsche. So we'll kind of see. But yeah, he kind of called him out. But it's good to call out whether it's a player or position group or a side of the ball after a win. I enjoy that call out a lot more than trying to play the blame game after a loss, trying to figure out, okay, well, who's at fault here? Because that's what we always just try to do. Like you divvy up the pie, and it's like, I'm going to, associate, 62.5% of the pie, the blame pie goes to this side of the ball or whatever. But yeah, he kind of pulled. But I loved what he said about. And there's something to be said about the eraser on that end of the pencil, and they took away a lot of these calls on defense, and we've kind of touched on that for the last month. And then you were really forced into this because of a lot of guys you weren't, you didn't have with you. And, I think Joey kind of summed it up. It's like you want it to look really complex. You want it to look very confusing to the opposition, but you at its core, you want it to be simple and basic for your guys because they'll play faster. I mean, Ruffin McNeil famously said around here a whole bunch of times when he took over midway through the 2007 season for defensive coordinator, and that's what he said. We're going to play base, and he I think his quote that he would hammer this home: clear eyes equal fast legs. He would just say it over and over and over again. And I think there's something to what Tim is trying to do here a little bit, but some of it has been just out of necessity in that we got 2 practices with this dude at this position. So guess what? He doesn't know what all this long list of calls means. So let's just go to the top 6. And if we can teach him that, then away we go. And that was kind of Devin Cromwell. That's, whoever else that you're dealing with that it's getting pressed into duty.
I thought it was really interesting to hear him talk about sort of the positive trends defensively in conference. And we're still very early on in league play, obviously, with a lot to come. But I know there are a lot of warts still. I mean, I've mentioned the name Lyle Sentencich a few times over the last few weeks, which gives you an indication of how you would feel about a defense in some various situations. But didn't mention it after last Saturday in Tucson, as it was one of, if not the best defensive effort that we've seen from Texas Tech this season. And I may put it up there with one of the best in the McGuire era, because I just am really impressed when you're able to continue to hold a team to 3 time after time after time again, especially with some of the skill position weapons that we know that Arizona has. But for all the warts or things that you don't do so well, I'm beginning to kind of wonder, First, today's episode brought to you by Gametime. Never sweat buying tickets to your favorite event again with Gametime. It's always a breeze using the Gametime app where you're going to find the best last-minute deals, and I love being able to scout out a view from any seat before pulling the trigger. Of course, you're always doing it at the lowest price guaranteed. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the start of the event and even an hour after it begins, which means you can finish off that final brat, that final beer at your own pace at the tailgate, because Gametime is the place to find last-minute seats to any event. Gametime gives you the fastest and easiest way to buy tickets, but not just fast, also secure and simple to use. So right now, download the Gametime app and create an account and use our promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account and redeem our code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today for last-minute tickets at the lowest price, guaranteed. For all the warts or things that you don't do so well, I'm beginning to kind of wonder, do you defend the run pretty well? Because I'm looking at some Big 12 rushing statistics, and I see the guy that's second there on the list right behind Taj Brooks. Well, you've already seen him, and you held him to less than 100 yards. That was a Scattaboo from Arizona State. Again, a lot of things can still change, I suppose, as conference play rolls on, but I think particularly maybe you're starting to figure some things out when it comes to defending the run, which you had a lot to figure out when it comes to defending the run going back to early on in the season. But I'm feeling a little ambitious as far as what you're able to do there and stopping some opposing ball carriers.
Yeah, and I'm starting to, I've mentioned this a few times on stuff that, it kind of bothers you, some stuff you just let go when people talk about your team and things like that. I heard a statement, I guess it was yesterday morning, and it was like, well, Arizona State is about to play Utah, and they haven't seen anything like the physicality of that Utah defense, not even close to it. And I thought, well, that's as Deion Sanders would say, that's a bunch of bull junk. I thought I thought you were pretty darn physical, and like you really kept Scattaboo in check, and I thought you were very physical, as you touched on the toughness and the physicality with Arizona.
Yeah.
It was something that stood out to you maybe first and foremost of anything.
The violence.
Yes. And so I don't know where that shows up necessarily in the stat category, but I think you're right. I do. I think you're right. I think we'll learn more as we go. There's going to be some times where it's called upon. I think that maybe the other night versus Arizona and Tucson, the dirty T, as they call it, I think we get a bit of I want to say maybe a bit of a pleasant surprise, like, whoa, boys really came to hit tonight.
Yeah.
Wasn't necessarily expecting it. And I think what Joey's trying to teach his kids now is like, okay, gentlemen, we've shown some improvement. Now the challenge now becomes, are we consistent? Can we do this week in and week out? Is this who we are, or was that just a flash in the pan, those couple of weeks that we put together? I don't know. So that's the challenge. But I do think you are trending the right way. I do think you can tackle the run and guard it and defend it and all the stuff. And so we'll kind of see, because it's not – Baylor, I just think you're sadly mistaken if you're out there thinking you're going to roll the Bears.
Totally agree.
Not saying you won't, that it can't happen, but they rolled into Lubbock, Texas 2 years ago, kind of hemming and hawing around and whatever, and they worked you over. I think you're in a better spot now than you were then. They're probably not in as good of a spot as they were then, but and TCU's the same way. Puff your chest out and feel too good about yourself at your own risk. I just know maybe it's the PTSD, but both of these teams are, which that's what you have in the next two games, and they're both good enough to, embarrass you if you show up and don't play well. That's just this league, I think.
Yeah, I want to get into some of that on an upcoming episode, kind of the divergent paths from that night when Tech and Baylor met in Lubbock and what's been going on with those programs since then. We'll get into that before the end of the week. But The reason I think I'm feeling so ambitious about the physicality aspect of it, at least, if not other things, is because I don't know why that would be there one week and disappear another week. You can imagine a defense maybe having a successful day when an opposing offense has a terrible day, and you're like, wow, we looked really good. And it may have mostly been because the other team was sucking on this particular night. And so that may not translate to the next Saturday. But when you're showing up to the ball with bad intentions and you're able to make it look like it did on Saturday, I don't know what that has to do with the opposition. Like, I would say nothing. It's all you. And so I don't know why that wouldn't be something that we could maybe expect to see continuing moving forward. And I think we had seen some of it in some previous weeks, but there was nothing like Saturday night. I don't know why. I was taken aback almost by it. And it was really from the get-go.
Yeah, I thought the score dictated it on that day, but I thought against North Texas, you really came out playing faster. And it's funny because I've talked to some of the media folks that cover Arizona State, and because they're in pretty good shape, and I mean they've got a home game against Utah. They're 4-1. Their only losses against the Red Raiders, but they just talked about how they just were 2 or 3 steps slow and not near as physical against Texas Tech, and how Texas Tech made them look slower and not as physical. And it just all depends on how you are viewing these games and from what prism. But I think Utah probably felt like they got punched in the mouth repeatedly and maybe weren't expecting it after they had done the exact same thing to Utah and Salt Lake, So I hope you're right. I hope that you can bring that same fight and the boxing analogies just overflowing, keep them coming, because that's what Joey has preached to these kids. I mean, it's the foot in the tire with the Creed deal. It's the Thomas Hitman Hearns and Marvelous Marvin Hagler from 1985 first round, where both guys nearly punched each other out. It's one of the greatest rounds of boxing history. Right. There's some other matches that he has, but that's what he's trying to instill in these kids, and it must continue if you want to continue to be relevant and have this kind of path of this season that you're hoping to continue to have. But it's just got to continue.
It's also manos de piedras, hands of stone, which is a descriptor. Now that I say it out loud, you probably don't want to apply to your pass catcher core, but everybody else, go ahead and run with that. All right, let's get into another thought from Coach McGuire that obviously we are all waiting with bated breath to hear about, because it has to do with your injury list, some guys you've been missing, how he describes their open week. And he also touches on some of these younger names that you've mentioned this week and sort of how they're being utilized during this open week, and possibly maybe the opportunity that is lying ahead for them. Here again is Coach McGuire.
It was great. Like Isaac Smith practiced yesterday, Amir Washington practiced yesterday. Chapman Lewis is trending in a really good direction. He didn't practice, so he ran. But when you have stuff like that, you want to see, like Eddie Smith traveled with us to Arizona and was available if we got to a point. He's trending in a really good direction. Peyton Morgan, Malik traveled with us, and if we needed him to. Speaking of Malik, Joseph Plunk practiced yesterday. And so getting those guys back, but when you get that thin in some of those positions, those young guys have got to be ready to step up. And there are some guys, Oliver at Star has been doing a really good job. And so guys like that, we want to kind of up their reps, especially this week. But it all starts, I tell all those young guys, it all starts with how can you help Coach Perry on special teams. Usually that's where it starts with the young guys. And so we did a young guys special teams period yesterday. We did a young guys 7-on-7. The old guys did 20 minutes individual and then a 15-minute introduction to Baylor. And then we let them go run, and then we had the rest of practice, like a scrimmage and all that stuff. And so we just, whenever you get banged up in certain areas, you got to have somebody that's going to step up. What a crazy time to not have like Joseph Adedire and Dylan Spencer, but have Charles Esters come back. Thank the Lord, that helped us so much, and so those young guys are the ones that we're really keen on and maybe help us get out of a game or help us on special teams.
Great to hear about Isaac Smith and Amir Washington, hoping for that trend to continue in a positive direction for Chapman Lewis. I'm taking it as a positive sign that he didn't even mention the name Braylon Lux. So I'm going to knock on wood as it relates to Braylon's status.
And he mentioned Eddie Smith.
That's right. And this
I
is
know
the name
you, Eddie. I know you.
This name is sweeping the Locked On Texas Tech Nation, and not just his, but I'm curious, Chris. Some of those guys that he mentions. Is this, if you were able to return to being a healthy-ish football team, are they back on the back burner? Is it like an injury-only type of opportunity, or do you think there's really a chance for maybe some of them to punch their way through? First, today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. And NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Say you're watching a game, you get hit with a hunch, an instinctual calling. Well, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you're going to place your bets to keep up with everything going down in real time as you submit that slip. And right now, FanDuel is going to get you started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. That's right. $200 in bonus bets guaranteed with only a $5 bet out the gate at FanDuel.com. I'm curious, Chris, some of those guys that he mentions, is this, if you were able to return to being a healthy-ish football team, are they back on the back burner? Is it like an injury-only type of opportunity, or do you think there's really a chance for maybe some of them to punch their way through?
It's a great question. I think there's some potentially yes, and some I'm not sure. Because here's what you have. You have these very talented freshmen that are part of this big time recruiting class, or one of those classes that you had that you read about and it was ranked in the preseason top 25 of not preseason, but just ranked in the top 25 classes and all that stuff nationally. And there's a lot of names on there, and you kind of get all excited about these names, and then you forget about them because it's like, okay, yeah, that's cool, but I'm just worried about the guys that are actually going to play, and let's revisit in a year or three, depending on. Well, anytime you have recruiting classes like that, you typically have talented players. And then when you have situations, what I would term like an injury cluster, and what I mean by that is injuries are always the worst when it always comes at the same spot, or when you feel like you're getting like hammered at one particular position. Because there's only so many guys that do this, at each spot. You've got 3 and 4 deep, but if you get 2 and 3 hurt at the same spot, you're kind of screwed, and you got to start moving guys over and all that. Okay, so that's why your position flex and all that stuff. Well, you kind of are seeing a bit of an injury cluster at free safety and at outside linebacker. Hence the reason that. Because he does say there that Chapman Lewis didn't practice, but is trending the right way. Did he say this?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's running. What I heard.
Yep.
So still not there. He would. I think that he went on to talk about they almost redshirted Devin Cromwell. They really looked at it. Devin Cromwell was interested in it, and then they have kind of said, "Man, hey bud, I'm gonna need you," and so. I think that they've committed to Devin Cromwell now playing. So this is your one that is not necessarily a young guy. He's an old guy, but that they've said now you're going to play. So in that case, with that, and I hear Chapman Lewis, kind of trending the right way. I don't know if you're there yet with a Peyton Morgan or a Malika Skera, because both of these guys are long, rangy, athletic, both fairly highly recruited, that I think, could have potentially pushed their way in. But I don't know if we're there yet because Devin is healthy. You still have Jordan Sanford. Now I hear the name of Plunk practiced, yesterday, and then Chapman's not too far away. Okay, so there's that one. But the outside linebacker thing, good question. But you still may be I just know what we talked about on the broadcast was Joey's quote was Eddie Smith is wrecking shop against our offensive line. Is that pro Eddie Smith? Is that our offensive line is struggling? We've already talked about the O-line. I don't know, maybe a little bit of both. I just know when I look at Big Ed, might as well call him Too Tall. He's a large human. Ed Too Tall Jones back in the day, 70s Cowboys. Eddie Smith, he's a bit of an unknown to some, but I've told that story the other day. It's like, who is that specimen? Well, Eddie was on the trip, and so it's like they unveiled him to the public, and now you're hearing him be talked about. But if Amir's back and Isaac's back, you've got Harvey Dyson back, you've got Charles Esther's back, you've got Rigsby still involved. I don't know. My point there would be if you start to hear more and more about Eddie Smith, I think with now a lot of these guys in the mix, it really may tell you Eddie's just saying, I'm not asking nicely. I'm here to do my thing. Yeah. Keep in mind, he's still got 4 games where he can play and maintain his, and that doesn't even count what may be a Big 12 title game or a bowl game or anything like that. He's still, you've got 6 games left. He can play in 4 of them, no questions asked. So worth monitoring. And if you see him, you'll understand why.
Well, and that group has got 2 guys. They ain't coming back this year. So there's some gray area more with those DBs. Like, are they in? Are they out week to week? But obviously with the Data Ray and Dylan Spencer on the shelf for the season, I think there's probably going to be still a help wanted sign of some sorts, at least throughout the year. So maybe there is more of an opportunity up front for one of those guys to step in.
By the way, Eddie Murphy Raw, which I was quoting earlier when we first came on, one of the greatest stand-up routines in the history of ever. It's really old now in a way, but it's still very relevant and hilarious. So hopefully I didn't throw too many people off with that. A purple leather suit and black gloves from the comedian that you're wearing.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It still stands the test of time, though, the humor and the jokes.
Fairly impactful from a comedy standpoint, ultra impactful from a fashion standpoint. I think that's probably the biggest mark that it made on pop culture. All right, switch gears here before we get out of here, Chris. Let's get some round ball cliches ready to roll in the noggin, because we've had a lot of people asking about it. It is an open week from a football standpoint, so I thought a perfect opportunity to squeeze in some thoughts on what the Red Raider men's basketball team has got going on. We're within a month, November 5th, buddy. We're going to be cooking against Bethune-Cookman right around the corner. So it is literally just a few weeks away, and we actually had some details revealed here this week as it relates to some tip-off times for Texas Tech's Big 12 schedule. I'll throw it up on the screen here for those watching on YouTube. And I think there is not so much interest necessarily in the time, but as it relates to the schedule, which you and I really haven't dove into yet on the program, there are a lot of folks that are looking at a certain stretch that involves Houston, Baylor in Lubbock, Arizona in Tucson. And that's just one of the several reminders that the Big 12 Conference, while already very real, is getting even realer as you roll into this new era of Big 12 hoops. Might have also seen reports this week regarding a Grant McCaslin extension through 2029, 2030. Man, it was a lot of fun last year. And the thing that's really exciting about this upcoming season is I think he's got more bullets to fire by a long ways than he did a season ago, man. Are you ready? Are you starting to get those cliches ready, switching from the oblong ball to the round ball?
Yeah, well, here's you one. When I look at that schedule and you start thinking about some of these stretches, the cliche of Lion's Den meat necklace comes to mind. Yeah, that's just the way this league is going to be. I think they're really trying to highlight this league from a television standpoint. There's all kinds of releases coming out from the conference about flex games and trying to just really bring that sport to the audience in a variety of different ways. And they've cut a side deal with CBS to bring more games on CBS and all the things. As you know that's this is a soft spot for Brett Yormark, that also one that I think he thinks that can be fairly beneficial financially to the league as well. And like the best way to sum up what you're looking at as we look way ahead and you just start to understand what you're getting into from a basketball standpoint this year is this reminds me of the Big 12 South back in that 2007, 8, 9 range.
Yeah.
Because, and I mean this with every fiber of my being, I think you could be, seventh in the conference, and that may be good enough to be the 15th or the 12th best team in the country. And I 1,000% believe that. Like you're going to see that when the preseason top 25s start to come out, you're going to see 5 of the top 10 be Big 12 teams. You're going to see 7 of the 7 or 8 of the top 15. You're going to see 10 of the top 25. I mean, you're going to be in this kind of sweet spot. Between Houston, Kansas, Baylor, Iowa State, Arizona, those are top 10 teams. I think you have Texas Tech, Cincinnati, and potentially BYU. There's some others that are top 15, top 20 teams. There's others knocking on the door. I mean, this thing is just going to be an absolute monster. And it's here's what else I'm going to say. This is semi-pro basketball. I mean, that's what it is. This is G League stuff. This is but much more high profile. I mean, you got a lot of salary and NIL rolling through this. The coaching is elite. Yeah, bring it on. But that's what you're about to get into here. But thankfully, we have until. I tell you what else I saw is weird. If you're looking at the screen, you see that game against UCF. It's on New Year's Eve. That is December 31st. That is in Lubbock. I think that is like a 1 or 2 o'clock tip-off.
Yeah, 1 o'clock.
You don't play a game before that, okay? You go from December the 21st all the way to December 31st. That is so what you've done is you've eliminated that what on paper is a really easy game where you get your guys back from Christmas. You beat up on somebody and you kind of get them back in the groove before you start conference play. You've taken that off because your conference schedule is now extended a bit, and you've added 2 more games in your conference schedule, gone from 18 to 20. But that's a long stretch between games for a college basketball team in the middle of a season, especially when that first game after that stretch it's huge. Like you look at UCF coming home, like that's a game that you would say we have to win this. Got to chalk that one up because so many of these others are going to be monstrous and brutal. So we got to get them when we can. But anyway, no, I did notice that. But yeah, Meat Necklace, Lionsden, all that Big 12 South reference, all the stuff. Your league will be brutally good, awfully good, wonderfully good. I don't know. You take your pick on the word, but yeah, buckle up, folks.
Man, I can't wait. It was a lot of fun last year, even with all the things you had working against you and in year 1 of a new administration. But the additions to the roster, the returners on the roster, and feeling like now we have a great feel for what Grant McCaslin can do with any roster has got me also feeling ambitious about what you're going to be able to do on the hardwood. So get ready. It's just around the corner. All right, good stuff, Chris. As always, enjoyed it, my man. Appreciate the time, and we'll see you for the next one.
We love you all. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing with Locked On Texas Tech and the Matador Mob and all of our interactions there with Cowan and I. So we certainly appreciate it. Everybody enjoy your Thursday, people, and hope you're gearing up for that bye week, nothing weekend where you can kind of go do whatever you want and not have to stress or fret about a football game. We'll save that for the following weekend. So,
and as I've indicated before, I am sick enough that I'm going to be sitting there on Saturday thinking, God, I wish I was watching these old Red Raiders.
Getting put through it. Yeah, I know.
I want to get put through it again.
It's like it's just.
Well, that was a lot of fun last time, so I'd love to be put through that again.
Yes,
get away with the win and do it in the fashion that you did. So hopefully we're cooking up something like that on the other side of this weekend when the Baylor Bears come to town. Appreciate everybody being out there. Thanks especially to those everydayers for rocking with us, well, every day. And if you're doing that and you're not a Matador Mob insider, you're missing an opportunity to chop it up with Chris and myself anytime, any subject. It's a direct line between Chris and myself and you with one-on-one text messages directly to your phone. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the QR code there to try out a free 14-day trial, or you can check out the show notes if you're listening via podcast for the link. It's already been a wild and woolly time, and we are only getting started. And just hit triple digits as far as Matador Mob insiders. So I appreciate all of you guys rolling along with us, and we still got a long way to go. So make sure you get involved if you are interested in that. For Chris, I'm Casey. We appreciate your time as always. Thanks for being out there, and we hope to see you back for the next round on Locked On Texas Tech.